we get started with Kyle, who you all know, I wanted to take the opportunity to thank somebody in our team who's been very special. She's been working with us for a long time. She graduates this year, so we're going to miss her very much. So Cassidy, if you don't mind coming up here. I know you don't want this, so I'm going out of my way to do it. But this lovely young lady, you know, I could really speak all day about her, so I'm not. I'm going to let Joanne do most of the talking, but we're going to miss you.
Cassidy has been my intern for the past 3 years. She's the mastermind behind every single handout you've probably ever received when you've come to these demos. So she's really integral, and I'm so sad that she's leaving, but I'm really, really proud she's going to be going to University of Michigan to their combined Master's in Public Health and Dietetic internship program. So it's a really, really prestigious
One of
program.
the toughest.
Couldn't be more proud of her. She's the best, so you can just give her a round.
If we could give her a hand. So, without further ado, I leave you with Chef Kyle. Enjoy pickling.
All right, thank you. So today we're pickling. Coming up very shortly into the summer, we'll have definitely too many vegetables in our gardens to really eat before they go bad. So pickling is one of the things I do a lot at home. One of the recipes we have in the handout today, we're actually going to go a little bit beyond pickling and a little bit into fermentation, kind of just taking that another step and making some kimchi. So as we go along, you guys all have the 3 pickles that we're going to be making on our table, so feel free to dig into them whenever you like. One thing I will say, the kimchi on your table does have a little bit of salted shrimp in there. So if anyone is allergic to shellfish, I would stay away from the kimchi. All right, so cauliflower. Cauliflower is what we're going to start with first. Cauliflower actually pickles very well. It holds up, it stays crunchy. It's a very firm vegetable, so it's not one of the vegetables that gets limp and soggy. So what we're going to start out here by doing is, first thing you want to do to make sure is that everything that you cut up, when you break down the florets, you want to try to get everything as a consistent size as you can. That way they all pickle at the same time. So I have a little bit clean to start with. To start the liquid, for this one we're going to do a little bit of apple cider vinegar. If you like your pickles more sour, what I would just you can simply like play with it, cut back a little bit on the amount of water you add to the recipe. And just stick with the same amount of vinegar. That'll just give you a little bit more acid in there, make them a little bit more sour if you like. You can also cut back a little bit on the sugar if you like them a little bit more sour. So I'm going to start with that. Let's add our water. So the 2 of them. So again, this recipe is just about half and half. Then we have 1 lemon. You really do want to make sure that you are using a whole lemon, not lemon juice, because what you're really trying to get out of the lemon are the oils and the seeds, which will really give you like a really nice deep lemon flavor rather than just the extra acidity from the lemon juice. So we have that in there. Just a little bit of turmeric. Turmeric is, upon being extremely healthy for you, it's what gives the cauliflower on your table really nice golden color. And when you try it, it's a little bit of earthiness to it as well. So a little bit of whole peppercorns in there. Whenever I'm pickling anything, I always like to use whole peppercorns. For one, you don't get the black specks running throughout, and it's a more clean flavor that kind of impermeates the liquid itself. And then a little bit of whole cloves, and then just a clove of garlic. So you can slice it, smash it. It's all going to get throughout the liquid. So whatever you like. So what I'm going to do here is actually just take this, bring it up to a boil. While that starts, I'm actually going to start on our second one. So the tomatoes. Today I have some local heirloom cherry tomatoes that we're doing, which are a little bit different colored from each. So the important thing when you're doing cherry tomatoes or really any tomato, you want to make sure that you puncture this skin with something, whether it be a toothpick, a tip of a knife. That's really going to allow the brine to get inside of the tomato. It's going to keep the tomatoes from exploding on you. It'll really help them hold their shape when you get done pickling. So again, just go through there. Two or three small holes in it in the skin is fine. So we have them. We're going to set them aside. So this one, I started with a white wine vinegar because I really wanted to kind of keep the color of the tomatoes kind of clear. So this one, I'm going to start with the vinegar. Add our sugar and salt to that. And I'm going to leave the water out of this one for now. The reason being, when you're pickling something along the lines of tomato that has a very fragile skin, you want the pickling liquid to be cold when it goes over top of it. So the same thing with a cucumber. If you want like a cucumber to stay like really fresh and bright and crunchy, you can chill the pickling liquid and then top it off over top of the cucumbers. If you want it to impermeate a little bit more, get a little bit more of that flavor into the pickle, you simply like pour the boiling pickling liquid over top, and that'll kind of almost cook it a little bit which is what we're going to do with the cauliflower. The cauliflower is, again, the stem has a lot to get through there, so we're going to pour that over it hot. So that's going. So I've got that going up. Again, I'm going to slice my garlic for the tomatoes. Now where this one is, I am going to slice the garlic for the tomatoes since that is going in cold. So I'm going to add that into it. So the herbs and stuff for the tomatoes, I'm actually going to leave them out until we add the water at the end. Just so we don't really want to cook the herbs. So we want to get like a really nice clean flavor out of them. Garlic. So that's going. Okay. All right. So now we have okay. So you can see the first pickle brine is starting to boil. The vinegar on the right with the sugar and water is actually starting to come up as well. Now that this is coming up to a boil, I'm actually going to add our sugar and salt to this as well. So we'll let that go. And I'm going to take a little bit of crushed red pepper and add it into the tomatoes, just the extra little bit of spice to offset the acidity in the tomatoes themselves. Okay. So again, we have our cauliflower there, tomatoes there. So while these are going, so this is actually coming to a boil now. So the tomatoes, as soon as that boils and comes up, you really can turn that off as soon as we get everything stirred into that. So what I'm going to do with that now is actually take this and use the water to cool that off, just so that it sits. Then I'm going to take our fresh dill and one sprig of fresh tarragon. So I'm actually just going to put these in the container with our tomatoes. So you don't really even need jars to pickle anything. If you want to hold them, make them shelf stable, yeah, you will want to put them in a jar, can them. Just again, boil the jars until they seal, just to keep all the air out. Sorry, it's got a big whiff of the vinegar. So we're going to take these. So again, the tomatoes are cold. We want to keep them as cold as we can pretty much and just let them sit for at least overnight to really let that soak into the skin. How are the tomatoes? They're good? Okay, good. Okay. So now we've got the lemon cauliflower brine boiling. Now, if you can see that, the liquid is really starting to turn that nice golden color from the turmeric. So this one, what I'm going to do is while it's actually boiling, I'm going to leave it on and add the cauliflower to the brine. And let that go until it comes back up to a boil. Once it comes back up to a boil, I'm going to shut that off, and then we can add it to our jar. This one, where we are cooking it, it'll actually work a little bit quicker, even though it is like a firmer, stemmier vegetable.
What do you call that when you're pickling something quickly?
It's a quick pickle. Joanne's had all kinds of puns for me all day about things that rhyme with pickle. So this one actually will pickle a little bit quicker. There we go. Good job, Joe. So again, as soon as that comes up to a boil, we're just going to shut it off and kind of let that brine cook the cauliflower as it steeps into it. Okay. And now we'll get started on my favorite of the day, kimchi. So I'm personally someone that I love fermented foods. As long as I can remember going back, like it's one thing that my family always did. Is like we made sauerkraut every year. I had talking like 2,000 pounds of sauerkraut every year. And we would literally we'd make it at the end of the summer, do a whole field. Would put it in like 500-pound crocks. Everybody would take one home, and then we would all uncap them all for Thanksgiving. So it would sit like 6 to 8 weeks before we would even uncap it, and then that kind of lasted us through the year until we were ready to make it again. So fermenting foods is something that I really, really, really love. This will actually, so sauerkraut is actually very simple. It's nothing but cabbage and salt and a little bit of thyme. That's pretty much it. You just crush the cabbage, run it through a wheel. If you're at home, you can take like a rolling pin, just crush it, really get some of the juices out, salt it, put it in a crock, you put it in a jar, and stick it someplace dark for about 6 weeks. And it's really all there is to it. So the kimchi, what we're going to use is Napa, which is a really nice, gentle Asian cabbage. The leaves are not nearly as firm as what a traditional cabbage would be. You can leave this whole if you like. You'll get a little bit more, it'll retain a little bit more of the texture if you do that. I like to actually chop it. It gives you a little bit more consistency and it's easier to work with through. So what I'm going to do is actually take this and dice it just into like about one inch cubes. Try to keep it nice and consistent. They're going to go into our bucket here. And what you're going to do is simply salt the cabbage. You want to make sure that it covers it really nicely. It's kind of hard to over salt it because what we're going to do is actually cover it with water. So you're going to salt it. So you want just enough water in here to cover the cabbage. So what this is going to do is really going to start to almost cure it and break down the cabbage overnight. So we just do this. And this is actually what we're going to do is actually let that sit out. It's going to sit out on the counter just at room temp for a good 24 hours. So you want to let that go all day. That really will start to break everything down. And then when you pull it out, if you can see here, it's going to almost look like really lightly cooked cabbage. So I don't know if you guys want to take a handful of that. If you want to pass that around, you can kind of see what it should look like after you pull it out of the salted water. So you want to pull it out of the salted water and rinse it really well. You really want to get all that excess salt off of there. We're really just using that salt to help break it down overnight. I'll work over here so you guys can see it. So one thing that I love to add to my kimchi is actually a little bit of apple. It gives it a little bit of sweetness in at the end and kind of takes away a little bit of the super pungent taste that you can get from it. So what I'm going to do is just take an apple. Now a lot of this is going to break down, so you really don't need to be 100% accurate with your cuts, but they are going to be in there. So again, it's one apple going in there. We're going to take a few green onions here. And if there's different herbs and stuff that you like, if you tend to really, if you're someone that really likes cilantro or any other specific herbs that would go along with it, you can feel free to like throw a handful of cilantro in there if you like. The scallions, I'm just going to take a few scallions. Now, with this, you can use the whole thing. Cut them just into about 1-inch pieces. They're going to go in. And then a little bit of ginger. So the ginger is really kind of is woody and has a lot of fibrous material into it. So this is something that you really do want to mince very nicely. Or even, what you can even do is you could take it and run it through a blender real quick so that it's a puree. So you're getting the flavor out of it without getting a lot of the bite in the end. So.
It's not peeled.
Yes, it is peeled. Yeah, yeah. Any root you really do want to peel, especially ginger. If you're making a sauce out of it where it's going to get strained out, that's one thing. Anytime you're going to eat it, you do want to take that skin off because it does have a pretty good skin on it. So just mince that nice and fine. That goes in. So we're going to add a little bit of sugar to this so that it's just a little bit, the sugar, what that's really going to do is help feed the yeast. So think of this almost like you're starting like a sourdough bread. Like if we were making a sourdough bread starter, leaving that on the counter overnight to really get the yeast going, the wild yeast to rise. So it's the same thing with the sugar in our bread. You're really trying to feed that yeast and promote that's growing because that's what's going to start get the fermentation process going so that it doesn't actually spoil. Then along with that, one of the most important ingredients when you're making kimchi, and this is something that you really do need to find and not try to substitute anything else with. This is one of the main flavors that people recognize when they get it. So what this is it's called gochujang. It's Korean red pepper flake. So unlike the normal crushed red that we would get, or the crushed red that we used in the pickles earlier to get the spice out of it, this actually gives you a little bit of spice, but there's a ton of flavor that goes along with it. So that is actually one thing that is important. And then, what's that? So this is actually from H Mart. So there's several of them around. I've heard you guys have all heard me talk about H Mart before. So again, we're going to add that in. This actually has a beautiful color to it, and that's really is where all of that color comes from. So if you guys want to actually smell that and pass that around, you'll get a lot of that. So fish sauce. Is everybody familiar with fish sauce? Okay. So this is a kind of where definitely a little bit of the funk comes from, but it also adds a little bit of what you're getting from this is a little bit of the protein in there, which is another thing that helps feed the yeast and really promote everything growing the way we want it to, and not the opposite way. So.
Does it matter which brand of fish sauce it is?
All of them will work. The only one that I ever use is the one that has a little 3 crabs on it. So fish sauce itself is a very pungent ingredient. Anybody that's worked with it, it's definitely a very strong flavor and acquired taste. So it's not something you really want to go cheap on. It's like buying a bottle of cheap bourbon in a plastic jug or like a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. There's one that obviously is a lot more palatable to eat. So think of it along the same lines as that. It's something that will go a very long way, use very little of. So this is definitely another one that's very good to find. So we're going to add a little bit of that in. I think that was the second time I added it in, but so then mix all of this up. Okay. So now you really shouldn't have a ton of liquid in here now, especially after we strained everything else off and rinsed it earlier. You really want to take your time to get all of that off of there. And just judging by the color here, I'm actually going to add a little bit more crushed of the red pepper flake. I like it a little bit spicy, and I like how that color comes out. So we're going to do that. Mix this in. Okay. And now this is something that you really do want in some type of like a glass jar or like an earthenware container. If it's something that you really like, I would just say just buy like a nice little earthenware container. What that'll do is that'll actually start to take on the flavors every time you make it, and it'll almost like season itself every time. So we're just gonna pack this in. When you pack this in, you really want to try to make sure that you pack it as tightly as you can and get that going. So pack that and kind of just shake it out a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of our liquid here just to top it off, just to make sure we keep all the spices and that fish sauce in there, as well as the sugars and stuff that have liquefied from us putting in there. Top that off a little bit. And then with this, if you're using a jar, you want to kind of put the lid on, but not too tight. Like it's something that you want to have a little bit of that air get into. And then that really needs to sit on the counter and ferment for at least a day, at least 24 hours. It'll start to bubble. You'll see it to start to bubble. You'll see all the fermentation actually start to happen and start to break down everything in the jar. Once that starts to bubble overnight, you can go ahead and seal the lid and put it in the fridge. You really want it to sit after that for at least a week to really let everything start to break down, let everything that happens. The longer it goes, the more flavor you're going to get out of it. When I make it, I generally let it sit at least a month. So just stick it in the back. You'll know if anything's wrong because you'll smell it. It can get pretty bad pretty quick, but generally, as long as it starts to ferment properly the first day, which you'll notice when it does, and you'll really know if it's not going the way you want it to. Again, just seal that up, stick it in the back of the fridge, and forget about it for a while. I know people that have actually let them sit for a year on end before they even go ahead and open it. Not my favorite when that happens. It gets really funky at that point, and it kind of breaks down all the textures and everything. So it's good to cook with. It's good as a flavoring agent at that point to really get that nice earthy flavor inside of everything. But yeah, so that's our kimchi. Again, something it's actually very simple to make that you can do. So we actually. I don't know if anybody was downstairs for Earth Day. I know you guys saw it when we were down there. We actually did a kimchi dish down there where we actually made the kimchi. We actually showed the students how to make it. We gave them the same recipe that you guys are getting today, and did some stuff with it down there. Michael Pollan actually has his new documentary, Cooked, on Netflix. If nobody's seen it or somebody, it's based on his book, which is actually a really good read. Kind of goes through what makes us human, like how food actually helps make us human. And one of the documentary series is all on fermented foods. It's on all naturally fermented breads and kimchis and sauerkrauts and stuff like that, and how all different cultures have really grown using some type of fermentation to preserve food for life. And there's a lot of really good health benefits to this. It's really good for digestion. Some of the enzymes that it creates in the process are really good for brain health as well. So it's definitely a lot of good things that go on inside the little jar. So yes, sir.
Can you talk about burping with kimchi?
What's that?
Can you talk about burping with kimchi?
Yeah. So definitely, if it does start to expand, you'll see it in the lid. If the lid starts to bulge, what you can do is just maybe once a week or so while it's fermenting, just unscrew it a little bit. It'll breathe, tighten it back up, and let it keep going. Yes.
What about vegans? Can we just skip the fish sauce?
You can. There's yes. You can add a little bit. You might need a little bit more sugar in there to make sure that the yeast is okay to live properly. But yeah, you definitely can. Yeah, that'll add a little bit of that'll add the protein back into it.
So I've made 2 batches of kimchi in my life.
Yes.
One that was lovely, one that had friends came to visit,
Yeah.
and it was like a white.
Yeah, don't touch that.
What did I do wrong?
So that really all goes. all,
That got composted.
yeah. So what it is that first day, if you don't have the protein in there, if you don't have the right amount of sugar, and if the yeast doesn't really start to thrive in that first day, it's going to spoil on you instead of fermenting on you. So that's all it really is it's just that first day, making sure that everything's clean and sanitized, because again, we're not cooking it. Like anything that's in there is gonna grow. There's the acidity and the alcohol that's forming. When it grows, will help to combat that. But if it's there at the beginning, all it's gonna do is multiply. So, yes.
I've seen some recipes that have you, when you put the cabbage in with the salt, they have you massage the cabbage to break it down. Is that necessary?
It's not necessary. You can. It's gonna get the liquid out of there a little bit quicker. It might help it start a little bit quicker, and if you're looking for it quickly, yes. If you want it to get done in 3, 4, or 5 days, yes. But I've actually made it with whole heads of cabbage, and just like soaked like the whole head of cabbage for like 2 days, and just kind of make the process a little bit longer, because you do need it to permeate the center, and then kind of just pour the dressing over top and just let it sit in like a gallon jar, and done one whole head. But that process does take more time. So when they're telling you to massage it, it's so that it speeds everything up, because you're already breaking everything down. But what you're going to lose with that time is also the flavor profile that grows with the time. Like that, the yeast doing its job to break everything down for you, instead of you massaging it, is really what gives you that flavor profile that comes through at the end. So if you need it quickly, yes. If not, I would just let it go. And at the end, it'll come out crunchier at the end. So, all right. Anyone else? Oh, yes.
For both the cauliflower and the tomatoes, if you refrigerate those, how long are they good in the refrigerator?
There's a good amount of acid in there. They'll be good for probably at least 2 to 3 weeks without anything. If you plan on keeping them longer than that, I would say just use a jar and can them. So with that, like, just make sure that they're completely covered. Take the jar, like leave the lid on loosely, like just do it like a tiny bit finger tight so that it's on there, and then boil the jar. And like if you get a good self-sealing jar, it'll actually have a lid on it that works just like just like any jar is that you would buy from the grocery store. You can hear it. So again, you boil it, it'll suck itself down, and you'll actually be able to pick up the jar by the lid itself, and that'll be down. And then you can actually just put it in your cupboard. It'll be fine, and it'll be the same thing with like a jar of tomato sauce. You just want to make sure that that's still sealed when you take it out. All right. So how was everything?
Very
Good? All right. So thank you guys very much. I appreciate it.